Hey folks, thanks for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. Grab a seat on my big orange couch. As you've noticed, the couch has undergone a transformation. It was too small to fit you all. With that being said, that song was It's Game Time by Axion Ghost, and that's exactly why I thought it fitting to open this with. Because it is game time, and with me today is Dave Milner, and he can give you all of his backstory and tell you everything. Even we're going to talk a little bit on the election finagling. We're going to talk about Trump's mistakes and positive measures to deal with it. And with that being said, Dave, welcome to Kaiser's Castle. Are you sitting down comfy?
Oh yeah, I'm all good, man. Now, I also want to say to listeners to the Unpleasant Blind Guy page, Spreaker.com, guys, you just heard a few weeks of shows where I featured Mike L's documentary, Absolute Proof, and we're going to follow that up with this here. I realize that it's late March, but I don't want to forget this. I don't want people to forget the mechanics of how this coup took place. Now, I have a question, Kaiser, for you. And that is, you've got a new couch here. So is this a curvy couch like on Fox News, or is it one of these sexual sofas so you can get you an occasional piece?
Oh, no, no, no. My wife and I would never have that. No, it's a couch that'll fit everybody. It's in the shape of an old tank, a World War II tank, and it has these new buttons on it. It looks really nice, and there's plenty of room for everybody to sit on. So
So,
it's pretty cool. I'll throw a picture back up of it again. I had the picture of a bench, and now I got a picture of the actual couch. It's
well,
orange. It's a
that's
big orange couch still, but it's
well,
just
that's great.
yeah.
Now, what I'm wondering is, okay, are we talking about a Sherman? Are we talking about a T-34? Are we talking about a King Tiger? I mean, what kind of tank are we talking about here?
I can't tell if it's a T-34 or it was the Stalin one, the S1s that were bigger. It's a big one, or it could be a King Tiger. I don't know because it's like I said, it's in the shape of a couch, or it's made like a couch. So it's by the glacis plates and by the skirting and everything, it could be either of those. The K1, that's what it was. The K1. So yeah, I don't know. Kiev one.
Well,
Yeah.
there you go. All right. Well, it's good to be here anyway, and I hope people will get something out of what we're going to talk about because we're not going to pull punches here today. Well, Kaiser, you can tell me if you agree with me or not, but I think that overall, President Trump was a surprise to a lot of people in that he was a better president than some people thought he would be, and his administration makes some pretty good accomplishments, not the least of which were the Abraham Accords. But he made some fundamental mistakes, in my opinion, right from the off, because he started his term talking about how the election system was broken. And then that seemed to go away. That talk seemed to go away because A, he had a country to govern, and B, I don't know why he did not assign that as a secondary priority in his administration to fixing the election system or making it a little bit more honest, a little bit more transparent. But in my opinion, that was one of his major mistakes right there. Your view?
I have to totally agree with you. To be honest, Dave, I will say that first he was hamstrung by the DOJ. We all know this. So, and he also got hamstrung by the Republicans. Like I've said to you before, I don't think there's a bitch bit of difference between the neocons and the neoprogs. They're both, wanting Mr. Globaloni to run everything. But I don't think it would have went anywhere with DOJ because it took him probably 7 months to get rid of the guy that they did have in charge of watching elections on a federal level, for the FBI and DOJ. And that wasn't happening. So some of it's his fault now. I give fault where fault's due. That one I can't really blame on him. I'm sure he tried, but he did lose focus on it when he was campaigning. And the media, well, we all know about the time plan. And back in the day, I was telling everybody, watch out for the, what was it, the Election Integrity Project? Yeah, the TIP, or the Election Integrity Project. And that was made up of neocons like John Kasich from Ohio, and they war-gamed it. You know, everything they said in that report came out and was done. It was an open conspiracy. And this was published well before the election. And he should have had somebody looking into that instantly, and he didn't. But he did get a lot of people put into his cabinet early on that hamstrung him. I think the only one that somebody could say was in the system has never really been in the system officially until Trump put him in, and that was Sebastian Gorka. Sebastian Gorka even was shocked by how reticent and like I've said before, everybody talks about the deep state, and back in the old days they called it the shadow government. And I've pushed and told people the shadow government is nothing more than SES and SIS, Special Executive Service and Special Intelligence Service. And what that are people that make high six-figure salaries. They are there for 30, 40 years. It's not like federal law enforcement where at 57 you're shown the door. If you're Title 6C, they will show you the door in federal law enforcement because you have to retire with 30 years in. So the minimum or 20 years in, the minimum age you can get in, or the maximum age you can get in a federal LEO is 37. And that's why you have to hit that, or 36, I'm sorry, because you have to be out before you're 57. So there's some Loctite rules, but the SES has done that to protect themselves too, because they didn't want like people who were intelligence agents or cops, law enforcement, to be there for more years than they could be controlled, if you know what I mean. Somebody getting like a Hoover, somebody getting such a reputation, or on the intelligence side, the James Jesus Angletons, where they get such a good reputation, people will listen and follow them more than they would some idiots in FBI headquarters in D.C. That's my thinking on it. Your thoughts?
Well, what you're talking about really is the bureaucracy. You just gave some specifics on it, and this is the problem with cleaning out the swamp. I mean, drain the swamp. It was a great campaign slogan, and it was a great thing for any president to try to do, but it is exceedingly hard, especially when you get to some of these higher paid bureaucrats, because some of them, and this goes even for some of the lower paid bureaucrats, just basically paper pushers in D.C. We're not talking about people in the military and such. It's become a family business. This is multi-generational. You'll have people that'll work in X department or Y department, and they'll work until they retire, and their kids will take a job in that agency or yet another agency because that's the way it's done. So President Trump started with a group of people in the background that wanted him out because they knew that if the government was stripped down and made more efficient, a lot of people would lose jobs, some of which were very lucrative indeed. The bureaucracy, part of the reason why Beijing Bill is now president is because the bureaucracy got together and protected itself. What do you think?
Okay, I have a couple examples to prove that point that you just made. You look at Colin Powell. Well, his son was made FCC commissioner. Okay, he ran the FCC, Federal Communications. And I know this because I was a big fan of Opie and Anthony and, you know, that kind of genre of radio, besides Art Bell and whatnot. And they went after them consistently over stupid things. They just settled, I think, I don't know, what was it, uh, 10 years ago or something. It may not even been 10 years ago. A few years back, they just settled that those things. And I can't remember what Cumulus had to pay, but it was a large amount of money, like $350 million, if memory serves, in fines. So that's an example of nepotism, which that is nepotism, cronyism. And that's honestly how DC does exist. A general, everybody needs to remember, and I tell this to everybody I've ever talked to, same with admirals. There's been a few exceptions, very few exceptions. But generals go to their own little general school, and that one's over there at Fort Leavenworth, okay? Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
Are we talking about the War College here?
It's similar to the War College, but it's a grooming. It teaches generals how to be politicians. And then they go, it's like a finishing school, okay? And then you have, a matter of fact, Condi Rice, one of the papers, you can get them online, that I read before I ever met her, was from a Leavenworth paper she had written. So you have to remember when DOD people, and that was during the Cold War, when DOD people, you have to remember there's civilian side and military side. And on the general and admiral level, they are politicians first. And that's why the Joint Chiefs, although they're solid, when they put out their joint statement, I was like, okay, so somebody's gotten to them, okay? So once they hit general rank, everybody when they're a major and then a lieutenant colonel, they get that silver fever for the colonel, the 06 level. And then they're looking for 07, because at least if they retire a brigadier general, they get free stamps for life, free long distance, any kind of communications. It's almost like being a minor president or a senator. Your ticket's wrote. You'll have a museum, maybe, the military will fund. I mean, there's a lot of privilege with retiring as a general. And a 4-star, they are, a president can get rid of them, but it really can do a lot of political damage for a good general to be gotten rid of. And that's why that power move by the FBI and General Flynn was so shocking to the American public, I believe. And your thoughts on that, brother?
Well, that brings into focus, really, a side of the bureaucracy that a lot of people just really don't realize exists. I mean, we look, for instance, at generals and admirals as war fighters, and in so many cases, they're nothing of the kind. They basically, just to borrow something from Richard Marcinko's books, they basically just paper wars. I mean, okay, take an admiral that, take your average admiral. All right, they've probably served some sea duty so that they can say they've served some sea duty and get the ribbon on their chest. But it was probably, like one cruise, and then that was it. All right, the rest of the time, they spent in offices writing memos and papers and things of that nature, and basically just like any bureaucrat that works for the EPA or any agency or department that you can name is pushing papers from one place to another, and they just happen to have uniforms on. So President Trump's task was huge, if not insurmountable. I mean, it is going to take a complete reorganization of the American Republic, which I think will happen in a future generation, in order to get this kind of waste out of our government. And you've seen it before if you study history. I really appreciate the history of ancient Rome, partly because I can kind of translate it into what we're experiencing right now. By the time you got into the imperial age, we're talking about from Caesar Augustus on down, their bureaucracy was gigantic. And oddly enough, much of it was fulfilled by public slaves. In other words, slaves of the Roman, the Roman Empire, but they were still technically speaking the Roman Republic. And some of those slaves actually became at the point where they could be freedmen, and they became very, very rich. We know of one, history tells us of one named Pallas, who served the Emperor Claudius, who was basically his right hand and was responsible for much of imperial policy during Claudius's reign. And you saw that all down the ranks during the time of the Roman Empire. And that was partly what was responsible for the empire's fall, was because its government became so unwieldy that it collapsed under its own weight. And I think that we're seeing a version of that happening now. Our government hasn't collapsed under its own weight, but it has mutated into something other than the American Republic. Would you agree?
Oh, I agree with that completely. We're becoming a capitalist oligarchy in a CCP form, or as I like to keep stressing, look to STASI for disintegration. And it was two things they did: disintegration, and you can see the parallel to de-platforming. With Rome, a lot of people always forget Rome itself fell, but the Eastern Rome lasted for another 700 years, I believe. And the Rome of the East. And that's something that I see a parallel with, because notice the old Eastern Bloc, the old Soviet bloc. It still is reticent to adopt any of these cultural Marxist philosophies or critical thinking, critical theory. And I said this may be the first time in modernity where the East may save the West. And I mean that. It shocks my system to say that, being a anti-communist for so long and looking at the East dispassionately. When they say Putin is old KGB GRU, yeah, he was, but everybody forgets that morphed into the Russian mafia. That's why it became more effective than the Italian mafia, even the Japanese Yakuza. Because they had the organization ready to go when Russia collapsed. Every one of those intelligence guys made shitloads of money. And they became an oligarchical system. And they're capitalists to the core. It's all about the money. It's all about their oil, their national resources. Natural resources, too. So, it's not just the work of the people, but the people are even making money. But see, because of that blight, they still have a lot of human trafficking. They have a lot of things that people find distasteful. And but all in all, now don't get me wrong. If you criticize Putin or one of the oligarchs, they'll kill you. But you have to criticize them. But you can talk about the Rodina, Russia, all day long. And you see Poland, they're not putting up with this mask bullshit. Neither is Russia. Hungary's not. None of the Eastern Bloc, because they know it's depersonalization. It's a part of disintegration and de-platforming. So, a lot of people forget that there was a defector in the 70s that was out there for a long time. Bezmenov, Yuri Bezmenov. And he's laid out the blueprint that you're living right now. And then you can look at some of the writings from the Weathermen. The 1960s really did prep America for this. Except there was still a large portion of patriotism, and they couldn't do everything they wanted to do then because you still had too many World War II veterans that were alive. Remember, in the 60s, those men would have only been in their 40s. At the maximum, they'd be closing in on 50, late 40s. And then you had Korean War vets. Well, they would have been only 30s. And then Vietnam vets. So, you had 3 wars of vets. And we have a lot now. And who are they vilifying now? This is when they started vilifying cops by saying ACABs. And I used to be a cop, so, it sort of struck me odd, too, that we were villainizing our own police. And I'm not good with that, because I know the next step is you villainize the veterans and then the military. And now they're saying, and remember, Department of Defense, the head of it, and every Department of Army, Department of Navy, Air Force, all those departments have civilian leadership. It's in our Constitution. It's not run by the military. It's not run by the generals. A 5-star is not running it. Okay, he's got Department of the Army over him. Their civilian leadership. I don't know who the new guy is on that one, but DOD guys already said they're having a 2-month stand down to re-vet everybody in military service. So we're villainizing the military now, and that's active duty. So you villainize the police, villainize the veterans, and then you villainize the military. And because they know what they're doing will be unconstitutional at a time. And they do fear, it's just like Obama tried to do. He purged, Stalin did it too, the Stalin purges. Purged generals, and then when Hitler hit them, guess what? They had to hope that some of those generals, the war-fighting generals, were still alive. And luckily, they still had quite a few of them. And the Battle of Kursk was probably the major turnaround of that war. And, people just don't understand there is a difference in thought processes between the East and the West. And unless you can go into both of those sides, you can't really see the full 30,000-foot picture, or even 60,000-foot picture from outer space of this globe. And yeah, I said globe because I believe the Earth is round. I don't believe in a flat Earth. I do believe in a cone Earth. If you want to get into a silly conspiracy theory, the Earth is a cone. The inside of it, we all live on the inside, and everything in space we see that way. No, I don't believe that. I'm just being an asshole. But anyways, yeah, man, that's my thoughts on that. Your thoughts?
Well, you saw the preparation for all this from the 60s on, or I did. And, like I said, I have been watching this stuff since 1968. Just a little bit of preparation here and there, a little bit of influence through culture here and there, until we reach this point here. And the thing about this point here, as opposed to times past, is the government today, the bureaucracy today, is very much in tune with other Western powers who want a globalist meritocracy, a globalist oligarchy, however you want to put that. And what happens when you have that is you can go ahead and purge the more patriotic citizens in your own country, which we're doing it now, but they've been doing it in Europe for years, Europe and the UK. And in the end, all you have are loyalists. And as far as military power goes, your military power is absolutely reduced. Its main focus is not in protecting the host countries from possible outside threats, but protecting the oligarchs in charge of those countries from the people, because you can never stamp out the patriotism. Oh, you can fire all the people in the military who call themselves patriots or who voted for Trump or whatever. You can do all of that you want, but you can't stamp out the ideas that encompass patriotism. So you have to create, this is their problem right now. You have to create a physical protection system so that the tyranny that you are wielding at that moment is going to be protected not only now but in the future. They're trying to work towards the future. They'll fail as these things always do, but they're trying to work for it, and that is why you see the politicization of flag rank officers, not only in our country but everywhere. And really, the only problems that we face now militarily come from people who haven't drunk that Kool-Aid, who have other agendas. We're talking about Mohammedans and people of that nature. And the biggest mistake, Kaiser, that I can see that they make, and you can address this if you want, is that they are not, they believe that they can pull in the Mohammedans and make them part of the party. And they're not realizing that the Mohammedans don't want to be residents in their little playhouse. They want to quote the old song, they want to tear their playhouse down and put up a mosque. What are your views on that?
Well, I would have to disagree slightly on that because you have to understand they're making Islamic people, and I don't class all of them this way. I understand Islam very well because I've lived over a quarter of my life in Islamic countries since the Gulf War. And I speak Arabic. I kind of understand the mindset. But everybody forgets that Germany had a complete and total buy-in from the Grand, and everybody can look this picture up. Hitler met with the Grand Mufti of Egypt, and at that time he was the big shit man, and there was an actual Muslim brigade in the SS, Waffen SS, the fighting SS. Waffen means weapon. It doesn't mean, it's not like Schultz and it's not like the old
Schutzstaffel?
No, Schützenstaffel is SS. It's the old, I can't think of it. It'll come to me. My mind's shifting because I just spoke Arabic. Anyways, my point is, it's not the ones that ran the concentration camps like everybody says. That's a lot of malarkey. But to use Leiden's terminology, so, people on the left can understand it. But they were actually foreigners that fought for the SS. A lot of people don't even know. There was a woman who wrote a book. There were Jews that fought in the German Wehrmacht. And anyways, like I said, the whole thing, the winners always get to write what happened. They write the history. And that's why so few people talk about Rome still existing for another 700 years after it collapsed. But it existed in the East. And they're fine with socialism because if you go to Muslim countries, majority Muslim countries, they're capitalist for their business, but they hide their money like a socialist does, so the government doesn't know exactly how much they make, so they never really pay the full tax, but they want the social programs. So you just have to, unless you've lived there for a long time and been around the people and not just been on a military base, and you've actually went out there and lived with the people and worked with them, you really don't get a full picture of them. And even going out and talking with leaders or whatever, the leaders already know what they have to say to Westerners to get money. And that's really what they want, is the Western green. So yeah, they'll buy into it for the money, and they also will all stand together against it. See, they have a strong sense of tribalism, where Americans, we did have that, but they've been successful in dividing the nation under racial, sexual, sexist lines. And they've even created new branches that they can subdivide groups in. And the thing that I'll tell you is Stasi would envy, because they had files on everybody that worked in Berlin, both on the east side and the west side. Okay, anybody in Berlin, in Eastern Side, along other parts of the borders too. Uh, they had files on everybody, and they tried to burn them and shred them and all kinds of crap when the wall fell, because they didn't want the people to know how extensive. But there's a documentary called "In the Lives of Others." I suggest everybody watch that documentary. You can find it, I still believe, on YouTube. And Google, this should have been a warning, and this happened years ago. I think 2005 or it might have been 13, 14, 15. Yeah, it was 2013, 14, or 15. You'll find it, a write-up where Google bought the old SS headquarters, where Erich Mielke worked out of, and he was the leader of the Stasi. And they used to call themselves Czechist because they were proud. And the amount of surveillance they had every East German under, it's scary because of what they used it for, but now you're starting to see it implemented on a technological level. And the precursor that everybody should have been looking at is when Google was talking about butterfly, where they wanted dragonfly, misspoke. When they were talking about surveilling CCP citizens and everybody in China too, because they're not all members of the Chinese Communist Party. And they started out with this social credit score. You're seeing that implemented with the de-platformization, or attempted, of Gina Carano, a fellow Italian. You know what I'm saying, Dave? And that disgusts me. And she made her bones in the MMA, so that's a tough woman. And so that you have what I'm trying to get to is you're going to start seeing tough people push back. And they're already doing it. Trump has not given up. He's not gone away. I don't know what he plans on doing. But everybody who fell for the Q LARP, and that was what it was, a live action role player. That was probably after he got taken over in 2017, because it was real at one point. They started saying, stick to the plan. Trump's got a plan. Come on, if you've read his book, The Art of the Deal, or any of the other ones, Trump never has a plan. He goes by the seat of his pants and his gut feeling. And that's why he was quick to fire a lot of people in his thing when he realized that he was being fed some idiot by the rhinos. Or just like with Comey. But he just realized too late on all of these things. And notice Biden's first thing is asking for all those federal judges to turn in resignations that Trump appointed because Hillary didn't get to, because Obama believed she could. And with all these executive actions going on, I wouldn't doubt that there's not the hand of the former president involved in it. And if you disbelieve in that, look at Valerie Jarrett, who's now in Biden's staff. Oh, wow. That's an interesting thing. And wait, doesn't she live right next to Obama in D.C.? Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And yeah, that was quite a lot to chew on. Well, we may not agree completely about Islam and its influence and how bad that's going to be. But, you did make a point, which I heard before and I agree with, involving Ms. Carano, which is the Chinese social credit system. People, if you want to get an idea of what that is, I suggest you go to BitChute, or it might even still be on YouTube. I don't know. Paul Joseph Watson, and I think the video he has is called The Terrible Chinese Social Credit System. That'll give you an idea of what is in for us. But he said in that video, and Kaiser, you just said, what is going on here. It isn't as flagrant as the Chinese social credit system, but there might as well be one. If someone engages in unapproved speech, they're deplatformed, or they're kicked off of the major social media sites. Of course, I was kicked off of Facebook a few years ago, and now I can't access Twitter. So, I wear those badges of honor, but it's happening to a lot more people, and it is the unpersoning, if I can use an Orwellian reference here, of people who the powers that be do not approve of. And of course, those people are anyone who questions the tropes, the memes that are going on in modern thought. Global warming is real. There's a white supremacist under every bed, and we have to do everything that we can to spend all the money that we can to combat both of these. And of course, white people should, God, they should just frankly off themselves, because they are the most evil beings that there have ever been on earth. Nowhere else is racist, of course. And if you don't believe in all of those things, and if you don't believe that socialism is the wave of the future, then you're getting canceled from the public square. And a lot of people are very disheartened at this point because they've had an election stolen from them. And you can't even complain about having the election stolen from you, because let's say if you're Mike Lindell and you do that, you go on Newsmax, then some idiot like Bob Sellers, this little pretty boy wiener who was on there, reads off some spineless statement from Newsmax about how the election was fair and honest and they couldn't find anything wrong, and you don't get your message out. And that has a lot of people, I think, very discouraged. And that's how I'd like to kind of steer this conversation. Kaiser, I've said plenty about what people can do to prepare for the future generation that will bring back the American Republic. Not a possibility, it's inevitable. But I want to ask you, right, because you haven't been on any of my way back shows. What are your views on two things? Number one, how can people resist today? And number two, how can they prepare for the future? In other words, what are the writings and basically books and wisdoms that they can pass down to that future generation that will bring the republic back?
Well, that's twofold. You have to inform the youth on what they're looking at. By the way, there is a list of banned books that libraries have. My wife is insured to buy those banned books. Amazon's still selling them. There's like Fahrenheit 451. There's so many. I mean, stuff you wouldn't even think. Why are they banning them? 1984 Animal Farm, Catcher in the Rye, just all kinds of books that you're like, why are you banning these? Well, I can tell you why. It's so that there's no counter propaganda. You need to have those books. And trust me, go look and you'll see what U.S. libraries are banning. You'll find a complete list. My wife has bought the complete list. And then you also have to educate them on where this started with Gramsci, with Foucault. Honestly, you have to go back to the Frankfurt School also. Everybody wants to go back so far, but you don't have to go back that far. You go back 3 generations and you can see the problem and where it started to manifest. McCarthy was not wrong. And when the Frankfurt School came in and they took over Columbia and they started to be the thought leaders of the nation, you started to see the communist creep. And it went all the way out to Cali and Hollywood. And it started with the degeneracy of pornography and all that. I mean, we can go on and on and on. But the point is, you have to try to build a bedwork of knowledge, so even if they enjoy looking at porn, they know why it's there, and where it came from and how, and what its true purpose is. And then the drugs, the free love and drugs of the 60s didn't help at all. I think the war on marijuana was probably the most foolish thing we ever did. Just because marijuana to me is like beer. I mean, our money used to be printed on it. You know, even having hemp clothing and stuff for a while, I remember, was illegal to have. Or, you know, hemp has no THC. You know, I'm not an advocate. I tried marijuana one time at 14, put me to sleep, and I never tried it again. It just wasn't my bag, you know. Luckily, there was no internet, so nobody drew dicks and shit on my face and then posted it on the fucking internet. That's a great thing about being a child of the 80s, you know, coming into manhood in the 80s. The people in the 90s and stuff, the internet was out there, man. It was starting to come, and people were taking pictures, and they were getting posted. And so the internet is a tricky bailiwick, because if you can control your narrative, and what I mean by that is don't post your true thoughts. Make sure that they don't. And I'll tell you a really good book. James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose wrote it, and it's on. It's called Critical. It has theories on it, but it's crossed out, and it's why can't I remember? Anyways, Critical something, but it has theories on it. Just look for James and Helen Pluckrose's name. James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. He also has a podcast he does called New Discourses. I disagree with some of. He goes back a little too far on some things, but that's okay. He still comes to the same conclusions. But I mean, it depends on how far you want to go down the rabbit hole and really educate yourself on where this came from. The prison papers that Gramsci wrote, that's definite reading, because you'll see how the Italian communist, when he was put in prison and then was killed, how his papers after his death have led to this. And then you see Foucault, and you see the writings of other people. I don't want to get into all of them because we'd just be here all day, but you have to give them the source of where it came from. And the Stasi, I'm telling you, everybody keeps. I get the most pushback because I know where this came from. It's not. This is not Russian Marxism. It's a weird mix between Maoist and Chekist, i.e., Chekist thought that the Stasi had in place, and it's the purity spiral proves it out, where you can't be pure enough for the government. And yes, they'll use homosexuals and everybody else, but just like Mao, all of a sudden you're wearing glasses, you're a homosexual, you're a deviant character, oh, you've got to be killed during the Long March. So, you know, the Little Red Book came into play. And that's what people like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn studied. The Weather Underground was a Maoist organization. It was not a Marxist organization. And once he started writing and producing books, or, you know, he got the ability to make sure that these books made it into academia, it should have been a fait accompli. But nobody stopped him and Bernardine from doing what they were doing. And a matter of fact, Obama kicked off his campaign at Bill Ayers' house. You know, and this is a funny one. You can look this up on YouTube. I'm sure it's still there. Used to run, trying to think of the website, Breitbart. Andrew Breitbart, who was killed, you know, by a heart attack. But he was killed. That was a murder. That wasn't his body just giving up. And he even talked about, you know, how Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn are disarming, you know, because of how polite and nice they were, and what a great cook William Ayers was. You can't forget there was a undercover FBI guy that went in and told about what the Marxists and then you look at what the May 19th, everybody's talking about and it was a riot that happened at the Capitol. Everybody talks about that, but they keep forgetting that in 1985, Susan Lisa Rosenberg set off an explosive in the Capitol, destroying a lot of historic artifacts, by the way. And the media, that was a big deal back then. But it went away real quickly. And then the other thing I wanted to say, you were talking about something earlier. You're going to start seeing this, and I'm seeing it just locally. You had dog walking hours in Russia when it was about to collapse. That's when everybody forgot and said, screw it, I'm not listening to Izvestia, I'm not listening to Pravda, I'm not going to listen to anything that was going on at that time in the news, because they knew they were lying. And so they would walk their dogs when the news was on. Start looking around your neighborhood and you're going to start seeing that. When that's happening, and the thing about COVID, here's the cool thing, is they've closed down the places where people meet to discuss things. So those bars and sports things are gone now. They've dehumanized you by making you wear a mask out in public. So everybody just looks like some sort of drone, faceless drone. Women can't look beautiful. Wonder why the suicide rates are going up. Women need to be told they look good once in a while. And men are frustrated because they can't tell what a woman looks like. There's basics to sexuality that you need to understand, or not you and I, but I don't even think any of our listeners need to. But there is a problem. And this is by design, in my opinion. Your thoughts, brother? Because I just went on a long-ass rant.
Well, what you were talking about there earlier with all this is not so much what people need to read to prepare, to prepare their youth for eventually rebuilding the republic, but what to avoid. And that actually is a good thing to cap off. Well, it is. This isn't a way back show, certainly, but it is a good thing to cap off. Is telling people what they have to avoid, because these things will come up in that future, and they will need to know what to avoid, and they will also need to communicate just before the new republic is established. There will be a revolution. That generation will have to create a revolution. And we see the tyranny ramping up now because of the Wuhan and because of quote unquote hate speech and things of that nature. We're being denied often these large channel means of communication like social media. So you will need to go back to more personal things. I suggested in one of my shows that, hey, if they're still around, if you can find them, typewriters, yeah, they still exist. There are a few around. You can use those. And yes, you go out and you walk the dog, and you might meet a friend and talk to them stuff. It will probably even get back to, and I know you know what this is, Kaiser, the old cell system, where you have three in a cell, and each one of those three people knows one person in another cell, and so on and so on and so on. None of this I see happen while you and I are still alive. That's very unfortunate, but the left has done everything they can to create generations of people who are too comfortable to do the things that will have to be done. So if there's a lefty listening to this, you guys will get to party for a little while. All right. But there will be a future generation that will bring down your little playhouse, again, that reference, because tyranny has a way of feeding on itself. And once the obvious targets are gone, monster can't be sated any other way. And the paranoia will grow. And even the people on the left, you begin to see this right now, Kaiser, with the WikiLeaks website. There are people even in Hollywood who are going, oh, wait a minute, some of this stuff is getting a little bit out of control. That's going to grow. That's going to grow, and there's going to be a future generation of people. I am convinced, by God, I am convinced that there will be a future generation of people who will bring back the American Republic. And that's why I emphasize my show The Way Back so much, because people have to understand that, yes, it does look hopeless now, but you can resist now and you can prepare for the future. And my advice, and Kaiser, I'll give it to you to close us out here. My advice right now for people who want to know what they can do right now is to be your own Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of the United States of America, except for Justice Thomas and Alito, are basically cowards. They've decided that they're going to give in to the satanic spirit and just allow the uber powers to run the country, and they're going to rubber stamp things. When it comes to obeying the law, you guys out there know how to act. Okay, you become your own Supreme Court, because we can't depend on our Supreme Court anymore. And no, that doesn't mean that if your neighbor's dog comes over and poops on your lawn, you get to go over and blow your neighbor's face off with a with a 9 millimeter Glock. Okay, you know how to act. And when it comes to your rights, whatever the issue is that comes up, and there'll be a lot of them coming up, all right, you will have to decide for yourself and take into account the consequences that there will be, whether or not you want to obey those laws. You will have to be your own Supreme Court, and that could involve some pain, but you definitely don't want to be in your advanced old age with a grandchild or a great grandchild looking up at you and asking you, well, what did you do to resist any of this? And say to them, well, I just kind of went along. Kaiser, what are your views? Just to close this out.
Yeah, I don't have a problem except for one thing with neighbor disputes, just like domestic disputes. Here's the best way to handle them. Yeah, because I have liberal neighbors. You just don't dispute. If the dog craps on your thing, you talk to the man. An over the fence kind of conversation. Keep it light. Don't talk politics. If they start to go on politics, say, bro, we've been living here how long? We haven't had an issue, but we have this small issue. It's nothing big. It's not political. So stop with your political talk. And that way you start breaking down barriers. And eventually, I agree with you. This is going to burn itself out because it is already feeding on each other. Okay? This is a fact. It's the purity spiral, what I was talking about under Maoism, the Long March. It's going to happen. And they're going to fall out of favor. Even politically, they're already falling out of favor. Like, just the media is not reporting it. The big thing is the media has lost credibility. I think that's good. Support small programs like Dave's. I can never remember it because you're not that way.
The unpleasant blind
unpleasant.
guy.
You're not unpleasant. You're just a blind guy that's a cool dude. Dave Milner's program, and he's on. He can tell you everything at the end of it. And but honestly, that's one of the ways. The other way is you were somewhat right with the cell system, although I think it'll be a little different. I've seen how this really works. People need to learn field craft. Where you have a drop, a fence that maybe has a loose thing that you can put a hanger on and drop it down in there, and you put the little top back on, and you're going to pass notes. Printing press, or having your own copier. Make your own counter propaganda. Very effective. Go out and put it out at night. Do some funky poaching. Put something on Black and Sexy and do some funky poaching. And what I mean by that is that you set out, posters or, little created things. Become creative. You can only take the culture back. That's why they had such a weirdness about certain things, where people would put out little posters that were nothing. It was just like, it's okay to be white. Okay, it's okay to be black. It's okay to be brown. It's okay to be Chinese. It doesn't matter. It's okay to be whatever. But that it's okay to be white all of a sudden became racist. I still don't understand that one. But that is what happened. They lost their shit over it, getting put up on posters. I remember seeing pro-abortion stuff and anti-abortion stuff and on college campi. And that used to be how people communicated, on telephone poles. That's still, placarding is still okay. Don't do it in stupid ways and put it places that's going to shock the system. But put it out. Regular people will pass by and look at it. Put your thoughts out there. But also make sure that you have people that you have known for years. Nobody knew. This is how things get infiltrated. Nobody new comes in. And if they haven't proven themselves, they don't get in. Vet them that way. And then if somebody else says, oh, I met this dude that you know, and you're like, that dude, I don't know him. Oh, but he said he did. Yeah, he met with me and started talking to me, and I told him, yeah, you're good to go, but man, go away. That's your security. You have to think OPSEC, Operation Security. You have to go and put on a happy face. Be the party guy. And like I said, there's nothing a neighbor can't sort out in their garage with a couple cans of beer. And laugh and joke about it. And stay away from politics. Politics was never a big thing when I was young. I never heard anybody say, don't talk to them, they're a Democrat. Don't talk to them, they're a Republican. Never heard that. That all started around Bush Jr. So when they started calling Bush, a king or something. Reagan, they just called him Grandpa Caligula. I remember all the disses they put, and that was the first president I served under, was Ronald Reagan. And I'm happy I served under him. I'm sad I didn't get a vote for him. And yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts. I mean, you can tell me where you think I'm wrong, but I think that's the most sound advice I could give to people. Be peaceful.
Well, that's beautiful, and it emphasizes one of the things which I said in my way back shows, which was sometimes you're going to have to pretend to go along with the system. You're going to have to pretend to be all in, because that way the system will leave you alone. They're going to be paranoid anyway. All right. So just being out there openly shouting this stuff is going to work for you less well than pretending to go along and then doing your little thing in the background. But Kaiser, it's been an amazingly good show, and I really appreciate being on your program. And I hope your folks will check me out, the Unpleasant Blind Guy page at Spreaker.com. My normal show times are 1 p.m. Monday through Friday Eastern, and Saturday at midnight Eastern. And I'm also on TECNTV.com with the CEO of that organization, Mr. Kenneth McClinton, on Thursday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern on his program, The Exceptional Conservative Show. Guys, if you want a good news source, TECNTV.com is fantastic. He's got shows on there from the United States. He's got shows from Europe. He's got shows from Africa. All right, this is real news put out by real people who are out there. And of course, I also have to give a shout out to SHR Media and BZ, who is running that organization right now. There are some excellent shows on there as well. Guys, you don't need Fox News or Newsmax or any of these other chodes. Okay, there are great places for you to go, and there is hope. And I just want to say, Kaiser, God bless you, and thank you very much for having me on your show.
Well, thank you too, brother. And I just have to close out my show and say thank you all for sitting on a big orange couch. Grab your coffee, tea, soda, and/or adult libation that you have opened when you stepped on that big orange couch and chilled out and got to eavesdrop on a conversation between myself and a man who I highly respect, Dave Milner. And yes, SHR Media is an awesome place. BZ has an awesome show. So does Dave. All of his shows are. I find joy traveling through the boiler room, and that's on alternate current radio. I always want to say alternative current radio, but that's not what it is. It's alternate current radio, and they have a good show on Sunday with Patrick. And of course, there's music on Saturday, so there's entertainment there. And then WPRPN with Jaffe Ryder, World Pirate Radio Podcast Network. And the only show I have that's mainstreamed, and that's where I let my hair down a little more, and that is on, PSN Radio Network. And I enjoy that, and that's with Angel Espino. And great guy. And with that being said, I will slowly raise the drawbridge as you meander on out of Kaiser's Castle. With that being said, shuff out.